You've got mail.
That thought process was all about how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. And that means that we need to sort of give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while. You're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology.
Weaponized media. That is what we are dealing with. Well, big tech is doing everything they can to overrule our self-regulation. Your brain on Minecraft looks like a brain on drugs. He says it's actually easier to treat a heroin addict than a true screen addict. It's the exact same methods of addiction that big tech is using, that the casinos have been using.
The inventors, creators, understood this consciously, and we did it anyway.
Remember that when the enemy comes in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord shall raise up a standard against him. And remember that where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Yeah, we call it a smartphone. It's because the phone is smart, and we don't have to be that smart to use it. He's literally not just watching a video, but take a look. Oh yeah, let's scroll through Instagram and see what else is on there. A chimpanzee can use social media. I never thought I'd see the day. Well, not only is Google storing our facts for us, but they're going to start doing our thinking for us, and already have, actually. And that's dumbing us down dramatically. Are we now, in the 21st century, entering upon a new dark age? The largest and most standardized and most centralized form of attention control in history. The mass mind can be shaped now in the 21st century like never before. This is something that is programming your mind. You are not in control of your thoughts. When you are subjected to big tech's manipulation, they are doing what Edward Bernays only could have dreamed of. So there's so much hope when Jesus says, whom the Son sets free, he is free indeed. So we can be freed from the manipulation, freed from the addiction, and we can say, yes, it is no longer I who live, but Christ who liveth in me. And even more than the injuries and the odd, examples of the extreme examples of death, it's their maldevelopment of psychology and their perception of themselves that's being altered and marred. When we're so distracted and we don't have time to look at them and look into their eyes and affirm them, and like they come up and they've got this little bid for attention. Mommy, look what I did, or whatever. And we're like, oh, that's neat. Continuous partial attention, right? We're not really investing in them. What happens in their brain when a bid for attention goes unmet is the amygdala in the brain. That's like the fear and anxiety center is alarming. They're in this little state of anxiety. They can't put words to it, but they don't know if they are valid, if they are affirmed, if they are loved. Do they matter? Like they're being developed in their sense of self-worth. And I'm not talking about self-esteem like we should put our children up on a pedestal and be like, oh, like this. They develop a healthy sense of self-worth just by us spending time with them and enjoying it. That's the number one factor for children's self-worth as they grow up. Parents, spend time with them and enjoy it. It's that simple. Isn't that nice? How easy? Well, it's hard because then we got to sacrifice. We actually have to put these things in their cage and keep work limited and have evenings together, as we talked about in the first session, and come up with other ways. I'm not going to give you the laundry list, tips occasionally here and there, but here I am as a teacher prodding us to think and to consider this information and to come up with strategies in our own homes to make sure that those little ones are loved. Even our dogs might get depressed when owners overuse smartphones, study says. That is amazing to me. Screens and spiritual development. You want to know the number one factor for children to accept the spiritual values that the parents are teaching them throughout their childhood? There's many, many, many factors. I've got a whole seminar on this. Raising the Remnant. View it at beltoftruth.tv. Raising the Remnant. Very good information from the Barna Institute and from the Spirit of Prophecy. I love that series. It shows how the recent research and the traditional counsels that we've been given from inspiration would be telling us the exact same thing. So that's Raising the Remnant. But I won't go through all 50 findings of the Barna Research Institute on what increases the likelihood of children to develop the spiritual beliefs of their parents in their own life. I'll just give you the number one factor. The number one factor that increases the likelihood of children to accept and believe in the spiritual values of their parents is that these truths are being presented and passed on in an atmosphere of relational warmth and connectedness. Secure attachment. Not continuous partial attention, not distraction, not divided home, Not 2 against 3, 3 against 2. Hearts of the children, hearts of the parents turning toward each other again. That's the beautiful, beautiful picture God has given for the family that reveals his character to the children. Relational, warmth, and connectedness. That is our God of love. And as they develop through that secure attachment, they're supposed to get all of these developmental milestones in their intelligence and in their integrity and in their character and all these things. I kind of rattled them off earlier, but I had an opportunity to rattle those off for an audience of teachers a while back. I was speaking at a teachers convention, and I was going through some of this media content, and I wanted to see, by a show of hands, how many of them had witnessed children, in just the last 5 or 10 years, decreasing in their intelligence, in their motivation, in their curiosity, in their perseverance, in their character, in their integrity, in their, you go down every item, okay? And what we're looking for in development. What we all want in our own lives too. And I could not believe what I was seeing. Every hand went up for every item I asked them about. That they're all struggling. All the children, they say they have seen the population of children is struggling and decreasing in every one of these areas in the last 5 years. So the quality is going down over time. And doesn't that portend what the Bible talks about in the last days? So we should be not surprised by it. But I was also talking to a daycare provider. This was a daycare provider of 50 years. This lady's been in the business of daycare for 50 years, and I asked her, what's the number one thing? And this is one of the things on that list, too, that I didn't mention, but I said, what's the number one thing that you've witnessed in how children have changed in the last 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years? She said, the biggest difference about kids today is their eye contact and social abilities and conversation skills. She says, it's verbal and it's social. It's kind of both of those. The ability to carry on a conversation and to see you and to understand what you're thinking and feeling. It's all that social and emotional intelligence stuff. And that was another one of the things. All the teachers were like, oh yeah, kids are really struggling in that one, and that one, and that one, and that one. And we're all going, well, what changed? I mean, what is it about childhood that has changed so dramatically in the last 10 years especially, that's causing all of these things to be going downhill, and especially this one? Well, it's the very topic we're talking about here. Dr. Catherine Steiner-Adair has looked at this on a clinical level. She studied it as a researcher for her book that I'll tell you about in just a second. She went to preschool teachers. She went to elementary schools. She did tons of focus groups, tons of surveys. And she says the number one thing that the early childhood teachers are telling her is that the children are really, really struggling in this area of social and emotional intelligence, conversation, and verbal communication, and being able to read somebody's emotions. And it betrays a lack of connection with a mother. I mean, we got social robots we need now, right? Because we're not developing that intelligence, that EQ as it's called. Does God have the answer to this? A UCLA study where they took children out of school into the woods. That's a good thing to do, by the way. Get out of the classrooms for a while. Get out of the desks. They take the kids to the woods for a 5-day retreat. And the kids are doing archery, and they're doing team building activities, and they're doing hiking, and they're experiencing nature together, media free. No devices, no screens, 5 days. They do a test on the children before the 5 days to gauge their emotional intelligence. They do a test on the children after 5 days of no media and being exposed to nature. Take a wild guess. All the emotional intelligence scores are going up. Social intelligence, reading facial expressions and cues and emotions in others. And it's like, man, God's design actually works. Or should we be so surprised by this? I think the Waldorf people are onto something with that. But Catherine Steiner-Adair has studied the real reality of how children are feeling when they're in that disconnected situation. And reading these quotes from children is a necessary exercise to be confronted with their heart and their feeling when they're in this home setting of continuous partial attention or total neglect in many cases. So I'm going to read to you a number of quotes from children out of her book, The Big Disconnect. That's a great title for a book, isn't it? If we can have the big disconnect from our media and we can reconnect in our homes, that would be a great aim. But presently, it's the big disconnect in the home where we are disconnected from one another. Colin, age 12, says, there are definitely some parts that make it seem like my parents are really addicted to their phones. And I feel like my dad is with his computer, definitely. I mean, if he's like awake at 1, he'll check on the dog, and then he'll look at his computer and be on it till like 5 in the morning. And think it was like 5 minutes. And then the next day, he's really tired. Angela, age 13, says, "What I wish my parents understood is that technology isn't the whole world. It's annoying because it's like you also have a family. How about we just spend some time together?" And they're like, "Wait, I need to just check on something on my phone. I need to call work and see what's going on." Carlos, age 13, says, "When they're on the computer or something, it's always like they're entranced by it. They are addicted to it, and they just do it all the time." Tyler, age 7, says, "My mom is almost always on the iPad at dinner. She's always just checking." Penny, age 7, says, "I always keep on asking her, let's play, and she's always texting on her phone." Owen, age 9, says, "Once my dad was ignoring my mom so bad for like 30 minutes, so I sat on his keyboard. I got sent to my room. I was just trying to help my mother. I got in trouble, though." Ava, age 7. "A lot of time at home, when my parents are home and on their computers, I feel like I'm not there because they pretend like I'm not there. They're not even talking to me. They're just ignoring me. I feel like, sad." Annabelle, age 7, says, "My parents are always on their computers and on their cell phones. It's very, very frustrating, and I get lonely inside. When my dad is on the phone, I have this conversation in my head. 'Hello, remember me? Remember who I am? I am your daughter. You had me because you wanted me. Only it doesn't feel like that right now. Right now, it feels like all you care about is your phone. But I don't say that because they'll get mad at me. It doesn't help. It feels worse. So it's just the conversation I have with myself.'" So you hear the heart cry of these kids, and we can't, as responsible adults and people who can advocate for a better childhood, stand by and see this happen to so many children. Parents must be informed about the effects of this and shown a better way. I love this book, Child Guidance. It says, parents, be little children with your little children and enter into their little games. And it says children can be as free as lambs running about. And it says that we should make their lives as happy as possible. That's God's design. I mean, I can't imagine what the heart of God feels when he hears these children's cry of their heart. The little ones are crying out, and the God of heaven says, this is not acceptable. Us, with our limited sense of justice, are like, oh, that rips my heart to hear. He has infinite empathy for these little children, and he's designed such a happy childhood for him, but it's the disappearance of childhood. Neil Postman called it nearly 40 years ago. What is childhood? Early childhood particularly is parents, nature, play, books, labor. It's living a life that God designed for children to thrive in. So we need more of that. If we could saturate their lives with just those things, parents, nature, play, books, and labor. That's it. So much media, where does that play in? At the time he wrote this, it sounded a little alarmist maybe, like the disappearance of childhood. Is that hyperbole? Hardly. It was prophetic, if anything. Today, children's childhood is basically carved up in 1/3 sleep, 1/3 school and schoolwork, and 1/3 media and screen time. And where's the rest? Where's the parents' nature, play, and all of these happy things for childhood? Why is it that 3/4 of UK children spend less time outdoors than prison inmates spend outdoors? We have made for our children a virtual prison, although they're not the criminals. We are, if we are permitting this. We cannot stand by. This is criminal in the sight of heaven to destroy childhood in this way. The Last Child in the Woods by Richard Louv. A tragic title, but a very positive book. It's so hopeful. I love this book. He talks about all the benefits of nature for childhood, but one of the things he points out is absolutely tragic. A study was done of 11-year-olds, surveys, and this was in the UK, and they were asked, okay, how many of you have climbed a tree before? Now, that seems like a silly question because you would figure 99% of 11-year-olds have climbed a tree. The majority of 11-year-olds today have never climbed a tree. What? What is childhood? That's a milestone in childhood. I'm 8 and I got up the tree, or whatever age. The majority of 11-year-olds have never climbed a tree. And the ones who had climbed a tree, when they were interviewed, they said, when I was up there, all I could think about was really wanting to get back indoors and go and play my video games. That is sad. The researchers then asked the children, after we're done with our studies here, how many of you would be interested in paying a visit to the park? We'll go to the park, right? 100% of kids, right? Just like, hey, Rover, want to go for a walk? Tail is wagging, right? All dogs want to go for a walk. All kids are ready to go to the park anytime, yes? No. Only a third of the kids wanted to take them up on that, like, yeah, I could go to the park. Well, they all want to go play their video games. Children spend twice as much time on video games alone than all outdoor activities combined. Ages 6 to 16, twice as much time on video games alone than all other activities, all outdoor activities combined. Man, that's a sad thing. But let me give you a little hope. Now, this clip I'm going to show you is going to take you on a roller coaster. It's first going to be like nostalgic and nice and hopeful, and then it's going to be like, oh, it's going to let the air out. But then it's going to end on a positive note. So just listen in.
When you were a kid, what did you do for fun?
So we'd go blueberry picking, for instance. That's so cute. But it was true.
We grew watermelons, plantains.
I found an old sign which was big enough for me to sit on. It made a great toboggan. It was very slick, very fast.
I had a few fish in my basket, and I looked up on this bluff, and here's this black bear sitting there watching me. If he starts chasing me, I'm going to keep throwing the fish out of my basket until he's gorged and he won't bother me.
And what did you like to do for fun?
You go door to door, get a group of kids, and you play lots of games, hide and seek, just going out to the field and playing baseball.
And we built these massive forts, the kind that you can actually sit in and play in, with our friends. And it was just really wonderful.
So what do you like to do for fun?
Video games, definitely.
I like to go on my phone,
text, some email.
My favorite thing to do in the world is definitely watching videos and playing video games. Those take up so much of my time.
3 hours or 3 to 4 hours a day. Same.
5 hours straight.
Just last week, I watched 23 episodes of a TV series in less than 4 days.
I forget. I'm in a house, I have parents, I have a sister, I have a dog, I just think I'm in the video game, I completely get lost. I would die if I don't have my tablet.
Whenever I feel upset, I'd play video games and I'd feel normal. It's really wonderful.
When your daughters grow up, your great-great-grandkids, what do you think will happen if this trend continues?
It's scary to think that they'll never have to leave the house.
Cindy grew up doing a lot of the things that I did and enjoyed, and I see what my grandsons are doing today, and it's mind-boggling.
By the time they have kids, it's going to be a really different environment.
I actually feel a little sad because I feel like he's missing out on what's out there in the beautiful world.
Special connection with nature. I think it's innate in all children, but needs to be nurtured.
I'm not sure what part of that clip spoke the most to you, but the part that really was heartbreaking to me was that the kids didn't realize that what they were saying was totally tragic. The one kid was like, I have a sister and a dog and parents, and I totally get lost in my games. It's like they don't even exist. The other one said, well, I don't feel right unless I'm playing, and then I feel normal. But let's end on that hopeful moment, too. I mean, didn't you love the imagery of the kid running through the woods? It's like, let's just be done with this early childhood media stuff, and as they get older, limited in quantities, and making sure we're just giving abundance of human interaction, nature, the joy of God's way of living. Because when researchers look at this, like Dr. Nicholas Kardaras, he says kids raised with screens, in his research, were almost universally what I like to call uninterested and uninteresting, bored and boring. They lacked a natural curiosity and a sense of wonder and imagination that non-screen kids seem to have. They didn't know or care to know about what was happening around them in the world. All that seemed to drive them was a perpetual need to be stimulated and entertained by their digital devices. Uninterested and uninteresting. They lacked a sense of wonder. Doesn't nature just bring out that awe, that sense of awe and wonder in God's world? But the media mind is bored and boring. The mind of Christ is curious and inquisitive. It hungers and thirsts for knowledge. The media mind is immersed in the counterfeit reality. The mind of Christ is awake to the wonders of God's reality. The media mind is enclosed in a virtual prison, but the mind of Christ is fully alive. And let's end there, because if we recapture the disconnected childhood, the childhood that's not so connected to media, then our kids can experience what Jesus said when he said, I've come to give you life to the full, the abundant life. And all of us, young and old, when we get this balance right, and we experience creation, and we experience revelation, and we experience one another in our social context, and in our church lives, and in our family unit, we can see the glory of God risen within us as Jesus is the light of truth that will fill, as we sing, shine, Jesus, shine, fill this land with the Father's glory. Then we will be that example, that peculiar people who are living life differently. And the world looks at our families, and they look at our children, and they look at our churches, and they're like, what's up with those kids? They have a spark in their eye. They're fully alive. Well, let me tell you about media use. Let me tell you about true education. Let's talk about nature. Let's talk about the everlasting gospel as it relates to the right arm of that gospel. And that is the healing of the nations, the healing of the minds of these children, so that they can flourish and develop into this beautiful picture, this tapestry of the character of Christ for this world. And when they see that, a loving and lovable Christian, a godly Christian family, the greatest sermon that could ever be preached, souls will be drawn unto Jesus as they see him lifted up, and our sacrifice, magnifying his sacrifice through our pointing to him and being willing to say, I'm going to put it in its cage. I'm going to set some boundaries and rules and limitations. And without firmness in that, it's going to creep back in and it's going to dominate our family lives. But after this, I say, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. My charge to each one viewing this is to come up with some way to put a limit on our media use. To think about the children's development, even if you don't have children in the home, to use this material with families and giving this material to families, getting our DVDs and sharing it. And God will do that work in the children. And we don't need to despair, because we know that even though the devil did this, the prophecy says the hearts of the children and the hearts of the fathers will turn toward each other again. And the Spirit of God will be poured out upon the children of the last days.